Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Abeng, and I am a member of the Historically Black Colleges and University Green Fund. It's called the HBCU. Today we are gathered here with my colleagues. We coordinate the works of the HBCU in Africa. Before COP29, we had over 700 young people on the African continent register their interest to be part of the pre-COP conference that we had, and we looked at empowering voices for climate justice and financial equity. We are hosting this media conference to give an overview and the state of COP29 perspective from the HBCU Green Fund. On the panel today, I have my colleagues who have been following different thematic tracks. They will be giving us updates of what is happening in the negotiation room and around the negotiation rooms. We've been following formal and informal consultations. We're aware that for Africa, the interest is really heavy on the new collective quantified goal and also issues around adaptation. I'd like to start with Tafadzwa, who also has been following a couple of negotiations, I think finance, the NCQG. She would be giving us a perspective on how it relates to the works of the HBCU. Tafadzwa, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Tafadzwa Kurotwi. I am from Zimbabwe and the co-founder of Emerald Climate Hub, and as a member of the HBCU Green Fund, working with young girls and women in communities to ensure that we bridge the gap and improve livelihoods in communities. And I'm here at COP following on climate finance and gender. And at first we're a bit, not having hope on the text in the gender negotiations, as we are fighting that, climate finance is also integrated into the gender text as well. Because we talk of these key issues, women's leadership, gender responsive action, climate finance and gender equality, to ensure that climate finance is also allocated to projects that empower women and promote gender equality. So we just don't want to say climate finance, but are we also integrating the aspect of gender, women and girls? And I'm really glad that now that the text in gender, we need to ensure that we also push our negotiators to ensure that climate finance is also integrated in the gender text. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Tafadzwa. Interesting to see that you're also following conversations to see that climate finance also responds to issues around gender. I hope that before the end of this conference, we would see some of our key demands reflecting in the new text. Without wasting time, because we'll still have a second round of interaction, we have also our colleague who follows issues around action for climate empowerment, that's ACE, Hussein. I would like you to also respond to how our conversations around ACE looking like. What are we going back with, especially with the work we do with HBCU?
Thank you, Lucky, and thank you for the opportunity too. So my name is Hussein Kassim. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Climate Change and Sustainability in Ghana. And like you said, I'm also the ACE negotiator for Ghana. So far, ACE negotiations has gone so very well as far as finance is concerned. We had our 4-year action plan at COP27, so we are actually in the implementation phase, so we're not supposed to have negotiations. But then, every year, there's the annual summary reports, which parties come together to review. But one main challenge which we encountered during COP27, during the adoption of the 4-year action plan, was I realized that finance was left out. There wasn't any instrument to support the implementation of finance at the national level. So for each COP, we've been trying to see how we can get a paragraph on finance in there. We tried it at COP28, and then unfortunately we ended up with Rule 16, which was quite unfortunate. The first to happen in ACE negotiations. But luckily for us, this time around, during the ACE negotiations, we were able to get a text on finance, which means that at least it creates a platform for us to be able to discuss finance in our annual ACE dialogues at the SBs. So far, that's the little update I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Hussein. Seeing that you guys have been pushing as well to have finance, and I would really like to see what Rule 16 is also saying. This morning we had the last informal consultation on the adaptation fund, and parties had agreed to a couple of texts that will be heading to SB 62 to see what decision we'll finally come up with at COP30 that has been tagged the People's COP. We hope that we can also get some of those kind of decisions with the ACE working group as well. Moving forward, I'd like to bring to stage as well our colleague, Denise Ayebare. She's from Uganda and also keenly following the issues around the NCQG. Denise, I also know you have a passion for agriculture and also with a couple of works you've done with the HBCU. What's the state of the NCQG in line with agriculture and also what the HBCU is doing in Africa? Over to you, Denise.
All right, thank you so much, Lucky. Like introduced, my name is Denise Ayebare, founder for Better Life International, supported by HBCU Green Fund. So I've been following up with finance, especially with NCQG, which is the new collective quantum goal, which is supposed to replace the loss and damage previously that was not met. And most of these discussions around NCQG have been progressing frustratingly, if I could say, because many countries are not agreeing to the texts, and you have a lot of things being prepared, from the modalities of how it's going to operate, from who is going to host it, what it is going to do, and some of these things are frustrating even as they move forward. Because when you're talking about 1.3 billion per annum that is going to come in, you're representing most of these vulnerable communities, marginalized communities that cannot take that in. But minus the NCQG, previously when you had loss and damage and you said it was going to be hosted in Nairobi, which is in Africa, based on what UNOPS and UNDR had found out that it's supposed to be transparent, the most cost-effective city, and then right now they say Geneva is going to host it, which does not reflect some of the modalities, some of the metrics that they had initially used to host which country is going to host the loss and damage. And that goes to the frustration of most developing countries and most of the vulnerable communities. But then I think the lastly I've been following up with mitigation, and I think that even mitigation, even when there's some sort of conclusive text that have been forwarded to SB 62, I think we as developing countries, even as the AGN or even LDCs, our priority is now no longer 1.5 degrees Celsius as compared to what developed countries want to front. We need to look at how can we invest more into adaptation, because the more we look at mitigation, the more we reduce our resilience and the more we increase our vulnerability, the more we invest in mitigation. So how can we have a global NAPS, the same way you have a global NDCs? How can we ensure that we have more investment? Because previously developed countries were saying they need new mitigation targets, additional targets, and that means with additional targets you have close to $2.63 trillion for any additional target, and I don't think that becomes our priority. So finance, I think it's frustrating when you look from the Santiago network, you go down to now the NCQG, and you see how we are reducing our resilience and increasing our vulnerability. Thank you, Lucky.
Thank you, Denise. We saw progress at COP27 when Africa pushed for the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund. We headed to COP28 in Dubai and also saw the fund finally getting operationalized with initial commitment. We have also seen at COP29 here in Baku a few further commitment, but these are still pledges. And Africa and also the HBCU, the African wing, I've also raised serious concern about moving from pledge to actual commitment and seeing these funds as well. I will be coming back to us with a final round of questions, but before we get back to that round, Abubakar, you're from Liberia, representing the HBCU in Liberia, and also shadowing issues around ACE as well. What has been the state of ACE negotiation? Looking, there are issues that have been raised by young people in promoting intergenerational equity. But we need to move. I'm also of the opinion that we need to move from advocacy to core implementation, even as young people and mid-level professionals. So we'd like to hear your response as well in this HBCU conference media briefing. What do you think is the way forward to enhance ACE negotiation? Hussein has referred to Rule 16. What is your take?
Thank you very much, Lucky. By the way of introduction, my name is Abubukar Kromah. I'm a Liberian youth and climate justice activist. And I'm also the founder and executive director of the Climate Advocate Association, which is a youth-led movement that engage, educate, and empower young people for climate justice. And we also represent the HBCU back in Liberia. You would like to know what the HB have been doing. Back in Liberia, we have been engaged in too many capacity building, as ACE focuses on collaboration, information dissemination, climate education and awarenesses. We've been very much engaged with young people with support from the HBCU back in Liberia. And I believe that following negotiation around ACE here at COP29, there are still more that needs to be done, because back in my country, Liberia, we as Africans, the continent, contribute less than 4% of global emission, but yet we are the one facing the major burn. So, and we're interested to know that vast majority of the people back in our country does not understand what really climate change is. So in that case, they need to be educated, they need to be informed. We need to build young people capacity so that they can be able to adapt and mitigate these crises that we are faced with by the adverse impact of climate change. So I believe that if HBCU can gain more support, with that we as an organization representing HBCU back in Liberia will be able to stand in a better position to receive support from the HBCU that we have to carry on our various local initiatives back in our country. So, and I would just love to throw light on a couple of projects that will be running in Liberia with support from the HBCU. Back in 2022, with support from the HBCU, we launched our Climate Smart Agriculture Project, building the capacity of indigenous farmers to adapt to and utilize the means of sustainable farming and agriculture. And we also been engaging various schools and universities across Liberia to engage the young people and students about climate change impact and how they should live sustainably. Yeah, so far these are some of the work that we've been doing with the HBCU back in Liberia. And to conclude, I would love to say that we are still demanding, Liberians, Africans are demanding climate justice, and we need more support. So climate finance, we need to achieve much more on climate finance here at COP29. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Abubakar, for re-echoing the urgent need for climate finance, especially for vulnerable countries, including Liberia. At the virtual pre-conference that we had in October, key issues, key reflections that came up were issues around decolonization and climate justice. I'm also just going to pass this one round to each of you to also, with what has happened from the pre-COP we had, and also the state of negotiations on ground. What is your take, each of you, your reflections and your reviews around decolonization and climate justice, and what opportunities have we as HBCU seen in Baku that we'll have to take to Belém COP30 that has been tagged the People's COP? I'm going to start with you, Tafadzwa. Colonization and climate justice, state of issues in Baku, opportunities for the HBCU.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I feel like there is need for more collaboration, transparency, and accountability in what we are trying to fight, which is climate justice. And we also need to get in the aspect of decolonization and of the system that has made us to come to, the climate crisis. We are not only just fighting what is happening in our community, but also we are fighting on the system to, achieve climate justice. I mean, in the global south, we are experiencing a lot of issues despite the climate crisis, and we also need to decolonize the system that has brought us today. And just to bring about what we can take in as the HBCU Green Fund network is that we need to ensure that we bridge that gap by, making sure that we take in a lot of partnership and collaboration to source a lot of funding, because we speak of, climate justice as an justice, but then is the justice fair? Is it equal? Is there transparency in the justice? And we also need to ensure that we cannot achieve climate justice without social justice. We cannot achieve climate justice without gender justice. And we cannot achieve it when we have not yet eradicated the system that has brought us to this climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were really strong echoes. The systems that really brought us to the reason why we are calling for climate justice. We really need to decolonize these systems. And also probably promote a more inclusive platform for discussing these issues. Yes, I'm going to move to Hussein. Yes, climate justice, decolonization, the HBCU, state of COP29 in Baku, opportunities for the HBCU. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lucky. I think one major outcome from the pre-COP event that we had is at least a lot of people are not able to relate very well when we talk about climate justice, decolonization, and I believe very well that one of the key outcomes was that a lot of people, or most of the participants who participated in the pre-COP, got to understand the linkage and how they can effectively involved in the process, because I really believe very well that without people understanding the issues, or understanding the issues, it becomes quite challenging for them to be effectively engaged in the process. And as such, what we did during the pre-COP with all the sessions that we had, created a platform for most of the participants to be meaningfully engaged. And I believe very well that that has resulted in the effective participation of most of the people here at COP, especially youth engagement and participation in the COP processes. Like my colleague Tafadzwa said, we have the opportunity to partner to look for funding to be able to implement some of the key activities or projects that we are doing in our respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Hussein. While you were speaking, I just remembered that sometime this year, you also led a couple of projects for the HBCU in Ghana, in your country. There's Denise and also Abu, who had led HBCU project as well in their countries. While you respond to the issue of decolonization, Denise and Abu, and also climate justice, state of COP29 opportunities for the HBCU, you can also chip in some of this point. And for our audience, if you also want to know more about the HBCU, you can follow our works online, the HBCUGreenFund.org. You can see what, some of the amazing stuff we're doing. So Denise, over to you. COP29, decolonization, climate justice, state of Baku and opportunities for the HBCU.
All right, so for us to understand the nexus between decolonization and climate justice, you need to understand where probably the first in and first out actually came from, because you look at how colonial powers have continuously exploited things like natural resources in the global south from industrialization, and they left a long-lasting ecological issue, but also economic damage. And today, when you look at the global south, it continuously suffers disproportionately from climate change, even when it contributes less than 10% for the global greenhouse emissions, as compared to even Africa that contributes less than 4%. So climate justice necessarily emphasizes that it's the right of communities to regain control of these resources for sustainable development and anything, their land back initiatives, everything they're supposed to gain back. But I don't think it stops there. When you look at the World Bank and IMF, these were structures that were set up even when some of the countries in Africa, actually by 1945, I don't think that any country in Africa had gained their independence, apart from Ethiopia and maybe Liberia. And these structures were created on a colonial system that does not work for the global south. That's why even when we talk about financing, and it becomes very crucial. Now that brings me to when you say that finance within COP29, how does it work for individuals at the grassroots, the marginalized people? The structures, the reason we are here to fight that may be loss and damage, the Santiago Network is hosted in Nairobi and not Geneva, is to defeat those structures that have continuously not worked for us. When we talk about grants, not loans, it's because all the structures, from the structure adjustment programs, from the loans, from everything that they have done, they are based on a structure that continuously puts Africa, that continuously puts the global south at the bottom of it, where you don't have a decision to make, where you do not have an opinion to make, and you are a mere participant. And this is the question I usually ask. Even our own negotiators within AGN or LDCs, are they participants? Because when it comes to high-stake decisions, they do not even get to participate. So climate justice, decolonization, all have a nexus, and it comes back to what the World Bank and IMF have been calling a polycrisis, where you have different crises happening at the same time, and the global south has to suffer the most of these consequences. And I think now just to connect it before Abu, to what it would look like within this COP, it would be the NCQG. It would be how do we ensure that this money goes down? Because you've seen very many false reports. OECD reported that by 2022, all countries had paid the loss and damage 100 billion. But when you go down to these countries, what they consider loss and damage are ice cream stalls. They're some of the weirdest things that you'd find in these countries. So what decolonization would look like is to ensure World Bank, IMF, these structures continuously work for the most affected, but then this finance, this money goes down to the grassroots, the marginalized communities who are mostly affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, for that detailed response connecting the nexus between decolonization, climate justice, state of COP29 in Baku, and opportunities for the HBCU. Abu, over to you. Same question. Decolonization, climate justice, state of COP29, opportunities for the HBCU.
Thank you very much again. And like my colleague have rightly stated, I think I will just be brief because it is nothing more or less than what they have, elaborated on. So I would just say, to add my voice to the many voices, I believe that this all boils down to, or is central around, changing the Western understanding of human nature relationships. I believe that Africans are the most impacted, right? While it is true that we contribute very less to these spaces, we need our voices on the decision-making table. This process needs to be decentralized. So Africans that are from the most impacted communities, MAPA, right, needs to be on the decision-making table. I actually believe that when the table is given to these people, when the table is given to us that represent, the marginalized community, indigenous people back in our country, I believe that we'll be getting somewhere with the issue of decolonization and climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Abu, for that response as well. We have a few more minutes to go. And before that, the GCA report of 2023 showed that there's been a decline from 7% to 5% in the adaptation fund that has been committed. And for us, Africa heading to COP29, we had come to Baku with a $1.3 trillion demand to be the commitment for the quantum for the NCQG. We are beginning to hear conversations from the various, we've listened to Tafadzwa, We've listened to Denise, who are both following issues on climate finance or the new climate finance framework. This morning, the co-facilitators for the Adaptation Fund agreed with parties the text on the CMA and CMP that will be heading to the SB 62, a couple of contentious texts around technology transfer, around capacity building. We would see some of these conversations heading to Bonn in June, July of 2025. For the HBCU, we're really interested in empowering communities to be able to demand climate justice and also be part of the process of achieving a decolonized world that promotes climate justice and full participation of young leaders. So this morning, this press conference has been powered by the HBCU. But before I ask us all to leave, each of you would give us a call to action. You also have the opportunity, if there's anything you've forgotten about the HBCU, to also add that to your call to action. I will start with Abu. Your call to action, please.
Thank you very much again. And my call to action and a parting statement will be, but before I further elaborate on that, I would love to state here that the HBCU Green Fund has been very much supportive of our work back home in Liberia, like I stated initially. They have supported a couple of projects. They have made numerous impact back in Liberia. And I want to commend Madam Felicia Davis and the entire HBCU team for the continued support. And I believe that at this COP29 in Baku, which has been labeled as the finance COP, I believe that the HBCU Green Fund and Africa as a whole needs support. We need to meet this target. Climate finance must be achieved at COP29 if we as Africans must achieve climate justice and a sustainable world for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abu. Denise, call to action.
All right, so the call to action is very simple. The countries you see here are very few as compared to where HBCU Green Fund actually operates. It operates in very many African countries, also across the other continents. And this is a call to every young person to interest themselves in what HBCU Green Fund does. And anyone out there that would want to collaborate and support grassroots movements and support any young person's work, to also support HBCU Green Fund, because it's doing tremendous work. From Uganda to Liberia, Ghana, Zimbabwe, most of the countries out there, when you have anything to do with engagement, advocacy, action, even as we move from advocacy to action, most of the work out there is supported. So we call on everyone to support the work of young people, to support HBCU Green Fund, and to join this big community. Thank you.
Hussein.
Yeah, thank you, Lucky. Getting access to multilateral funds is quite very challenging because, we're talking about billions, GCF, JEF, but getting access to these funds is quite difficult. It's quite challenging because of the bureaucracy. But then what HBCU Green Fund is helping to do is giving out these micro funds to be able to support some of these grassroots initiatives, which means that without that micro funds, these initiatives wouldn't have been able to come to reality. So we would want to play to philanthropists to come to the aid to support some of these initiatives, because without their support, it will be quite challenging to implement some of the initiatives at the grassroots level. Thank you.
Thank you, Hussein, for that very strong call to action. Tafadzwa?
My call to action would be, COP29 must be a turning point. We are tired of fake commitments and empty promises. So we need concrete and ambition and equitable climate action, specifically on the climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you. In October, the HBCU supported my organization in Nigeria to mark the World Teachers' Day with a climate change conference that brought together about 5 schools and 24 students. And for the first time, they had the opportunity to listen to climate change. So the call to action here is we have 24 more hours to go. We call on world leaders to really make this finance available and resources for vulnerable communities. Thank you for listening to us.
I'm sorry.
No troubles. Thank you. Yes, we do.